Hey everyone, this is Dennis Chang. Welcome to this week's video, which is a follow-up to what I did last week. And you may notice that the title for this video is the opposite of last week's title. And I want to just clear some things up about what I talked about last week. I think most of you got it. But before that, as always, if you can help me out, like, subscribe, leave a comment. It makes a huge difference. I actually managed to make just a little bit of money from YouTube advertisements. And most importantly, if you really like what I do, I don't have Patreon or anything like that, but I have courses for sale on my DC Music School website or on SoundSlice, or you can buy some of my music on Bandcamp. You'll find all the relevant links in the description box. It makes a huge difference because making YouTube videos is actually very, very time consuming, and I always try to be as efficient as possible. I was just watching a video the other day of a very successful YouTuber, nothing music related, saying that he was having a mental breakdown and he needed to take a break from YouTubing. It really is that much work, despite me trying to be as efficient as possible. So if you could ever help out and you like this content, thank you so much. Okay, so about last week's video, the title for that video was quite in your face, to say the least. But the actual content, I think, was rather nuanced. I think most of you got that. The video was not an argument to learn licks only and not to practice improvisation. Actually, it wasn't really about licks. It was about the importance of hard work, the importance of listening, and the importance of developing muscle memory so that you can transfer what you hear directly to your fingers. So if you haven't watched that video, watch it before you watch this one because it's related. And I can never stress enough the importance of intelligent listening, which I can talk about in greater detail in another video if you want. Furthermore, there is one extra little detail that maybe some of you might have missed. It's very subtle. I mentioned that all this was especially important in the context of certain styles that have a set language. So this refers specifically to styles like swing music, gypsy jazz, bebop, any style that is language based. And so if you're trying to develop something along those lines, then I think it is indeed extremely important to do this listening thing, this careful listening thing. But then again, of course, even within those styles, you have what I call anomalies, people who play within a style but have developed a really, really unique language. And if that's the case, well, the argument for developing muscle memory still applies, but the approach can be a little bit different. And that itself is a huge topic that I think deserves its own video. And I tend to talk a lot, so I try to make things as simple as possible. So I'll talk about that in another video where I'm going to talk about listening and transcribing and how to get the most out of listening. So let's just leave it at that. But actually last week I used the example of Sylvain Luc, whom I worked with recently, and we did a series of lessons for DC Music School, now available by the way. So if you're a fan of his, please go check out that lesson series. And I would say that Sylvain Luc is not a bebop player. He knows this himself. He has a unique language. He plays with bands, like rhythm sections that evoke a bebop style sometimes, not all the time, but his own language, his own concept is his own. But here's the thing, when people quote Sylvain Luc or other players as being very, very free and an excuse for not working on this or that, I have to again remind you where Sylvain Luc is coming from. He comes from a huge musical family, a family of very advanced musicians, and I think he was the youngest, or among one of the youngest of brothers. And since before he probably went to kindergarten, he was already immersed in music and practicing music very seriously. That is his background. That's his background. So from a very early age, he was hearing all sorts of music. And from a very early age, he was working professionally, learning the ropes, gaining experience, absorbing a lot of musical information. For him, it was less about transcribing or less about playing in a very, very specific style, but he was just a musical sponge since the age of, since he was a toddler, really. He is the result of that very, very rich musical environment. This is only my opinion, but when people speak like that, and they're not coming from the same background as Biréli-Lagrène, Sylvain Luc, and many others really, I can hear it in their playing. They have repetition. They've developed muscle memory based on scales, arpeggios, that, in my opinion, again, my opinion, are really not tasteful at all. I mean, ask yourself, when you hear these people play, do you tell yourself, hey, that's cool stuff. Maybe I'd like to know what they're doing. And if that's the case, okay, fine. And that's always, as a student of music, that's kind of my process when I listen to music. This is amazing. Why is it amazing? Do I want to learn this? Why is it that I want to learn this? So I repeat, last week's video was not about licks. It was about the importance of hard work. No matter your background, because even a guy like Sylvain Luc or Biréli-Lagrène and many other prodigies out there, they worked really, really hard. And they had the extra huge advantage of coming from a very rich musical environment. But it doesn't matter if you don't come from such an environment. It just means, okay, yeah, maybe you do have to work a little bit harder, but that's just the price. That's just the way things are. If you love something so much, you're gonna do what it takes to achieve it. So with all that said and done, today's video is going to be about the opposite. Let's just assume that last week we were talking about licks, about developing vocabulary in a set style, whether it's gypsy jazz, swing, bluegrass, whatever, any style that has a recognizable language. And especially in styles like gypsy jazz, you can easily get too caught up in learning licks and vocabulary, especially longer phrases. And in my opinion, if you want to reach the next step when you're ready for that, because some people might not be ready for it, as I talked about last week, well then the next step is to develop this freedom. And in my opinion, this freedom does come from the study of vocabulary, the importance of listening and all that. But then what do you do next? Well, the next step, in my opinion, one of the next possible steps rather, let's just say that there are many paths available to you, would be this careful analysis of all the vocabulary so that you can do what I said last week, is to break them down to their most essential chunks, what I call melodic cells, very tiny melodic cells. And from that, from a lot of, many years, let's say a few years of very, very careful listening, you start to feel it and hear it in your body. And that's where you can come up with your own ideas almost on the spot. The more you work on it, the more spontaneous it will be. So that's something that will require quite a little bit of work. If you're a beginner and you're having trouble doing this, then I suggest you always simplify things as much as possible. Keep working on your licks, and every now and then try to be a little bit creative. Try to change things up, try to break things down, but don't worry, let things happen at your own pace. If someone, because it is true, there are some people, students who, I guess you can call it talent, who can right away from the beginning be very creative and break things down apart and start using them in a creative way. If that's not the case for you, which certainly it wasn't for me when I was starting out, it's okay. Just work at your own pace. Have fun. I cannot stress that enough. Have fun. So like at the beginning of this video, you heard me improvise a solo over a blues. And I don't remember what I played, but that was like 2 or 3 takes. And then I chose the best one. But again, it's me playing in a way that I would say it's in the bebop style, blues bebop style, where I'm being fairly spontaneous. Like I didn't plan anything out, things just happened that way. And this is because that I've done this work of very, very careful listening, spending a lot of time listening. Hopefully in my playing, when I play like electric guitar, maybe you can hear my influences, right? Because after all, you are what you listen to. So it's probably in the style of like Wes Montgomery, George Benson, and I obviously cannot deny my gypsy jazz influences either. But that playing that you heard in the beginning of this clip is not a direct copy of anyone. It's more the general language that I've absorbed, the general feeling, the time feel, the vocabulary, the attack, the interpretation, and all that fun stuff. Nowadays, I don't spend too much time like lifting other people's lines. I generally, my ears are developed enough that I can just listen and get the gist of things. Every now and then, if it's a little bit more intricate, okay, I'll slow it down and grab my instrument and figure out what's going on. But a lot of the times when I play, especially in my practice sessions nowadays, I create my own phrases. Let's say I'm practicing something and I have trouble over a certain passage. Instead of copying someone's solo, what I do these days is I make my own solutions because I have the experience, I have the sound in my ear, and then I just take the time to develop the muscle memory by creating my own phrases. But again, I say my own phrases, but they are the result of this listening. So it's not necessarily the most original thing. It probably evokes players that you're familiar with, or they come from somewhere, but they're my interpretation of what I hear. I don't know if that makes sense. I know I repeat myself a lot because I think it's very important. We are creatures of habit, and we need this repetition. We need to hear things regularly so that they can sink in if we have not allowed such things to sink in yet. Just like when you're a kid, your parents hopefully told you, before you cross the street, make sure you look both ways. You probably heard this most of your childhood. And the same thing with music. If you want to develop good habits, I think it's very important that I repeat these important things. And now, speaking about creativity, one other thing you have to consider is that as musicians, especially jazz musicians, we tend to get very, very obsessed with this, I guess, mathematical or nerdy way, musician way of thinking. And we're always thinking from a musician's perspective. Like we're trying to play for other musicians. We're trying to impress other musicians. And all that's cool and everything. But most of the time, you're playing for people who don't know anything about music, who don't have any training. Especially here, I'm in Taiwan right now, for not much longer though. In Taiwan, most people don't have a clue about jazz. Even the people who play jazz don't really know the history the way I do. And that's something to consider, because it's not just about the lines that you play, it's how you play. And this is something I learned a lot from the gypsies. It's this idea of playing something like you mean it, playing something with passion, playing like your life depends on it. And I'm just going to explain this in a second. Chances are, people who are not musically trained or musically inclined have no idea if you're playing all the cool notes. As one of my Homestay students used to say, the juice notes. Yeah, they have no idea that you played a flat 9, sharp 13, or whatever, this cool tritone substitute, or that you did, I don't know, this weird concept that impresses all the other musicians. Non-musicians don't really process things like that, but they process other things. They process attack, dynamics, variety in rhythms, energy, and all that. And even from a visual aspect, certain visual things. When I play, one of the reasons why I play without sheet music, why I try to memorize music, is to have this image that I'm in charge of the music. I'm not like reliant on the music. You know, it's kind of a psychological image. That's one reason, but there are other reasons I'll talk about another time. And actually, 2 weeks ago, I was playing in the south of Taiwan for an audience of people who knew practically nothing about music, but they enjoyed it. But a few people in the audience noticed the following: that during the concert, sometimes I would be like, yeah, or like just doing these encouraging shouts or cries just with my mouth, yeah, stuff like that. And one of the reasons why I do that is so that it captures the audience's attention, because it did. They noticed things like that. And they asked, why do you do that? Because we're not musicians. And for me, it's part of the experience that I want to give the audience. And when I play, I try to add these elements that non-musicians can cling on to. So playing quietly, playing with a lot of intensity, and everything between, like accents. And then after playing with the timing as well, like sometimes when I'm playing like more intensively, I tend to be a little bit more ahead of the beat, and hopefully the rhythm section will also push a little bit. The audience may not be aware of it, but they can pick up on things like that. And also because non-musicians don't really process complex melodies, sometimes I focus my improvisation on playing simple melodies, but hopefully that are melodic enough for musicians and non-musicians alike. So if you listen to my blues at the beginning of this video, I did a lot of bluesy pentatonic stuff. This is a sound that I guess now in 2022 is quite familiar all over the world, this kind of bluesy way of playing. And it's generally appealing to musicians and non-musicians alike. So it's something that I like to do. And then every now and then I'll add some of these more intricate musician style lines. Then there's repetition, motifs, rhythmic motifs, melodic motifs. I think I started my solo like, and then like a little rhythmic shot, I think, stuff like that. These are things that, again, the audience can pick up on, whether they're musically trained or not. I didn't really do this in my solo, but like I especially do this when I play gypsy jazz, and it's something I got a lot from gypsies. It's the way I sculpt the notes. Instead of just playing, I might like what I just played. I played this B, but I don't give equal weight to every note. Like this B flat is kind of not very well articulated on purpose. It's not like if I give equal attention to every note, it's rather bland, but and I'm especially accenting this note and doing this quarter step bend, and playing with staccato, legato versus legato. All these things, the way you like even slide and stuff. Long, short, or short, short. Long, 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 long. Ling, ling. So the expression side of things, those are all part of creativity. And then of course there's the whole phrasing that can be talked about. I have a course on sound slice dedicated to phrasing, actually. I think it's called Swing and Phrasing, something like that. Check it out if you're interested, but I can also make a video about that some other time. But yeah, phrasing, just to talk very, very quickly about it. I think about jazz improvisation solos like I think about movies, how movies start. Some movies start with a big bang, and then after it slows down, then there's like kind of nothing going on until the middle section where there's another like a bigger big bang. And then after towards the end, that's like when you have all the explosions and everything. So that's one possible way of improvising. So basically when your solo starts, you start with like something really, really flashy. And then after you slow things down. And then when it's the bridge section, you start to bring things up. So I think about phrasing in that way, about telling a story. Another way I like to do is to start with nice and simple melodies and gradually start building up. And when I play my flashy stuff, it's usually in the middle, when it's especially like when we're going to the B section or going towards somewhere where I feel it's important to do this flashy stuff. Because that's another thing, this shredding that I do, I don't do it all the time. I do it in kind of, it's spontaneous, but in key moments when I feel it can have a good impact in my story. But sometimes I don't shred at all. Like in the beginning of this video, I didn't do any shredding in the blues thing. So things like that really I think are quite important. Actually, take Wes Montgomery, for example. He has like a typical movie script. He often starts with single notes. Then he moves to octaves, and then he starts doing rhythmic stuff with chords. He does this quite a lot. Check out a song like The Thumb, Sundown, and many others. And one way you can learn a lot about this musicality, creativity thing is also checking out jazz musicians' interpretation of melodies. See how they sculpt the melodies, where the rhythmic placement is, where the phrasing, how the phrasing is done, where the embellishments are, and all that stuff. Because you don't want to be playing a melody in a very boring way all the time. Well, sometimes it could be okay, but I think it's good to mix things up. Take, for example, the melody to All of Me. If you check out the way I think it's written on the real book, it's something like... Right, it's like, okay, it doesn't sound bad, but you can try different ways to make it more swinging. See? These little ghost notes that I do. In fact, at the end of my chorus, when I was doing, I forgot, I did like a chord solo at the end of in the beginning of this video, where I was doing, I don't know what I was doing, but with the right hand, I do these little percussive effects with my palm or something else, and that adds a lot to this excitement. And that's stuff that, again, non-trained musicians can pick up on. I don't even consider myself a soloist, let alone a good one. I think I'm a decent one, but actually professionally for the past few years, I've mainly been an accompanist, playing rhythm guitar or bass. It's something that I really enjoy doing. Soloing for me is more like a hobby, something I do on the side for myself, for fun. But despite not being the most amazing soloist on the planet, whenever I give concerts, I always manage to grab the listener's attention in some way. And again, keeping in mind that I often play for non-musicians, and I always, after the concerts, I always get these compliments. Oh, I don't know, I'm not a musician, but it's the first time that I enjoy listening to jazz when I hear you play. They can pick up on some of these things, and all the stuff that I've been talking about is related to that. Earlier I talked about the image. So, and this idea of, like, let's say you're playing a standard, even at a jam session, I try to give it my best. I try to be as musical as I can. So I make sure I know the song, and if I don't know the song, I see if I can learn it on the spot, and if I can't, then I probably won't play it. Because I think it's kind of boring for the audience if you're like looking at the sheet music and then you're just playing. Even just look at me visually if I'm just playing like. As opposed to, you know, just being in your face. Right. To have, it's also one reason why when you see me play, I like to move a little bit just to feel the rhythm to help me out. But also there's there's kind of a subliminal message in there, like the audience can pick up, like I'm kind of enjoying myself. Actually, that's one of the comments that I get most of the time when I play concerts, like, wow, I don't usually listen to jazz, I don't understand jazz, I don't usually like it, but for some reason when I hear you play, I can feel the joy that you have on stage playing this music. Well, there we go. Actually, I want to tell you this story about this one time. Long time ago, it was during the jazz festival in Montreal. I was at the hotel where they have this, like, they used to have like regular jam sessions at the hotel where most of the artists would stay. So I'm watching the jam session, and then this dude walks up next to me, and I don't know, but just not seeing who it was right away, but just there was an aura around this person, and it was George Benson standing right next to me. It's like, and kind of like, excuse me, sir, are you gonna jam? And he has this aura and this confidence about him. He's like, maybe. And then at one point, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna jam. So he walks on stage, he borrows the guitar, and right away you feel the presence in the way he plays. They play it at Billy's Bounce, and it wasn't like. It wasn't he wasn't singing, but it's as if he was singing. You can hear, for those of you who know George Benson sings, you can already hear his voice in the way he interpreted the songs. So it's the same thing. Play like you mean it. Work on your technique so that you can express yourself in that way. And that's on the guitar, for example. You think you can only do it down and up. Yes, it's true, but look, you can play here. You can play here. You can give more accent, lighter accent. And that's how I try to play. I play as if I were giving a speech. Because imagine yourself giving a speech, but talking like this. My fellow Americans, I have a dream. Everyone's going to fall asleep, right? But if you speak with tremendous authority and confidence, you can get away with saying the most nonsense thing ever. Think about politicians. Ha! So just like music, it's less about the content, even though in my opinion the content is very important, but it's about the delivery, the confidence, and the aura. So yeah, today's video was kind of meta, very philosophical, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of something to think about as you practice music. So things to think about when you try to craft solos. It hopefully gives you another perspective, another way of listening to music. Not just listening to the notes themselves, but listening to the interaction of the rhythm section, listening to the way the notes are being sculpted, listening to the way the notes are rhythmically placed and all that, and how the solos are being organized. Like check out Wes Montgomery to hear that, what I said earlier, how he develops his story. Okay, cool. Thank you. Leave a comment. Bye.